Here's Brody Brazil.
When you think about the upcoming San Jose Sharks season, it really is difficult to predict or project how things might even go. And that's because this was an offseason of so much change, transition, and turnover, right? Come this fall, there is so much newness with the Sharks. New players, a brand new coaching staff, a new general manager in the front office, and the hockey operations side has been largely changed. All of this, obviously, by design. They want to turn things around. They want to get competitive again. They want to go back to the postseason. But how instant can we notice these changes? How instant can you expect them to get back to where the team was, let's say, 3 to 6 years ago? I don't know that answer. I'm interested to find out. But because I'm so laser focused on the Sharks alone, I haven't even really looked at their schedule of who they'll be playing, when they play the difficult stretches, when are the easier parts of 82 games. I'm not even really up to speed with that. So that's what we'll do here in this video. We'll have a big picture look at the 2022-23 schedule for San Jose. My goodness. Are we already at the year 2023? Like, what happened to the 90s? Feels like just yesterday, but I digress. Okay, the big points, the overview of this season's schedule. First off, I hope that it is the first normal NHL season since 2019-20. And even that season was cut short by the pandemic. After 70 games, the Sharks were done. They were not a part of that restart, which took place in Edmonton and Toronto in September, but that was an abnormal season and ending of the schedule. 2021, that season didn't start until January. It was a condensed season. There was realignment, so nothing was normal about 21. Yeah, no fans in attendance largely. And then last year was more back to normal until you consider that so many teams went large stretches minus large groups of players. Like, was it November of last year that the Sharks had 7 players and their head coach out for about 2 weeks and a handful of games? Yeah, every team went through a stretch like that. So you could say that the 82 games were more normal last year, but certainly didn't resemble what we've come accustomed to in the National Hockey League. All of that said, knock on wood, fingers crossed that this might be a normal schedule and season once again. The campaign begins in Prague, 2 games against the Preds in the Czech Republic. They'll also play an exhibition game in Germany before heading to Prague. I have to say, I've been on one of these trips before. It was to Germany and Sweden back in 2010, and it does take a little bit out of you physically to travel all the way to Europe, to be out there for approximately 10 days, and they will get about a week off. In fact, I think it's one weekend they play these 2 games in Europe. The next weekend, they're back home in San Jose to truly open up their season, even though there'll be 2 games in. But that does have an impact on the body. To go to Europe, to be 8 and 9 hours ahead, and to take a couple days to adjust, even for young, healthy athletes on the San Jose Sharks, like, there is something to the fatigue factor there. So we'll see how their season begins and if there is any kind of a hangover effect from that trip. But exciting that they get to go to Europe to start their season. After that, I should say, as part of that, 82 total games in 189 days. And when you do the math, you realize that's 1 game every 2.3 days, which doesn't sound like a lot. I mean, that's busy, but also realize there are stretches of 3 and 4 and even 6 and 7 days without games, meaning that there are some very condensed portions of the schedule. On that note, 14 separate back-to-back sequences. That feels like a lot. I mean, usually every season, 7, 8, 9, 10. But 14 back-to-backs means that 28 of 82 total games this year are night after night. And you also realize when you're doing 14 back-to-backs or any type of back-to-back, that could also put you in a very easy situation where you're playing 3 games in 4 nights or even 5 games in 7 nights. It puts you in busy stretches, taxing stretches. And let's be honest, it's tough on any team, but especially a team like the Sharks who maybe are not currently as well equipped with depth and to be able to bring it night after night or 2 nights in a row or 3 times in 4 nights. It's just a really taxing thing on a team like San Jose. There's also 3 rematch series. I didn't know what else to call it, but when you play the same team 2 games in a row in the same city, I actually like this. Now, the first one's obviously Nashville in Europe. That one makes sense. But it's also the Avs later in the season, and there's one other sequence too. That's not normal either, although I have to tell you, I quite like it. We actually saw a lot of this in the abnormal 2021 season, these back-to-back games, which kind of set a tone in game 1. If there was the rough stuff, if there was some storylines, a lot of them carried over into the game 2 of that. I don't want to call it a back-to-back, but the 2 games in a row. I like those rematch games. I wish we see more of them. We don't. But for the Sharks to have 3 this year, even that's a lot. And then the longest homestand is of 6 games. I think that might happen twice. And the longest road trip is 7 games. But I believe that's at the end of January, beginning of February. There's a break in between there. It's like 5 and then off for a week and then a couple more games on the road. We'll dive into all of this in just a second, but it gives you an idea of the longest homestand and road trip of the season. Okay, but now let's take it month by month here to look at when things get busy. October is not a full month, at least for the hockey schedule. 25 days of the NHL season, 11 games for the Sharks. Remember, 2 of those in Europe, and then about a week off to recover. 5 home games. I'm counting only games at SAP Center as the home games, even though one of them in Europe is a home game. 6 away games. So 11 total in 25 days. November is when it gets the busiest. A game essentially every other night. 15 games in 30 days. Fortunately, 1 more at home, 8 at home versus 7 away. In December, it's actually quite light. Usually December is a heavy month of the Sharks schedule. This time around, only 12 games in 31 days. They always do the Christmas break of the 24th, 5th, and 6th off. That is again the case. Weirdly enough, though, this year, the Sharks not only play on New Year's Eve, they also play on New Year's Day. As long as I've been around, there's been one or the other, but this is the first time I can remember where they're playing on both of those technical holidays. January is also a bit of a slower month, 13 games in 31 days, but look at that, not a lot of home dates, only 4 home games in the month of January as opposed to 9 of them on the road. February, a little bit more home heavy, but again, a lighter month, only 10 games in 28 days. March, we start to ramp things up a little bit more, 14 games in 31 days, 8 of them being at home. And then April is actually, to close out the regular season, a pretty busy stretch. 7 games in 13 days, 3 at home and 4 away for San Jose. So here's a quick look at the month of October. And again, on the 4th, you see their game in Germany. Then they're over to the Czech on a Friday morning, and Saturday morning here, California time, 11 a.m. is puck drop against the Preds. Obviously, is that 7 or 8 p.m. local time at O2 Arena out in Prague. So they'll play those 2 games on a Friday, Saturday. Then they don't play again until the next Friday, Saturday, but they get a back-to-back. And on their, we'll call it true home opener, they get none other than Brent Burns and the Carolina Hurricanes 7:30 puck drop. So that should come with a lot of hype and a lot of interest too, because by then we will have seen 2 games. They will have been at weird start times, so not even everybody getting to digest both of those games like traditionally, but we'll get Burnsy facing the Sharks for the first time in a long time. Then on the 15th, it's Chicago coming into town, and it's the Doug Wilson tribute night. That game has been changed from 7:30 to a 7 p.m. puck drop. Some ceremonies to precede the game in honoring Doug. Very well deserved, very timely. It's at the beginning of the year, and it's obviously against the Chicago franchise, which he was also a very big part of. Then the Sharks make their annual early trip out to New York. It's crazy how it always works out this way. They go play the Islanders, the Rangers, the Devils. There's always been a different mixture of teams, and the Flyers, so it's a 4-game trip. Sometimes it involves the Bruins on that trip too, but always good for this team to get out east, early. I mean, obviously they will have already been to Europe, but business trips early in the season are fun. And I have to tell you from personal experience, this is usually a lot lower maintenance trip because it's very likely and possible you could be in that same hotel from the 17th, 18th, 19th, 20th, 21st, and 22nd because all three of those teams, the Islanders, Rangers, and Devils, are accessible from the same hotel. So it cuts down on travel for essentially a week right there. Obviously, when you go to Philly in that back-to-back, you're going to have to fly out after the Devils game, but it's a good trip in the fall. It's a fun trip in the fall, and it's honestly an easier trip from a logistics standard. But then they come home, they play the Golden Knights, and then Toronto, and then Tampa. That's heavy, heavy, heavy right there. First game against the Golden Knights early in the season. Definitely like to see that. And then obviously Tampa, no easy task to close out October. Halloween off, which is good for me and my personal plans. I don't know about you. I'd rather have that one off by choice. You only get Halloween on one day, right? So first day of November, though, the Sharks are right back at it. In fact, they play the 1st, the 3rd, and the 5th. Two of those three to start off November are against the Ducks. And oddly enough, both of them at home. So you get Anaheim flying in, then flying out, then flying right back in. And then you get 4 days off from the 6th to the 9th. St. Louis and Dallas on a road back-to-back. But then you fly from Dallas up to Minnesota and then back out west to Las Vegas. And let's just look at the geography here. Again, this is not so much about how the Sharks match up against any or all of these teams. I honestly don't know who the Sharks are yet as a team. So again, predictions, projections, I'm just saying here logistics of this. Flying to Missouri, then down south to Texas, then all the way up to Minnesota, and then all the way back out west to Las Vegas. A bit of a head scratcher. Then you're home for Detroit, the Rangers, the Sens, quick one up to Seattle. I love the fact that they're in the division and that's a quick hop. You take even an Arizona or back in the day, you take a Dallas out of your division. It's so nice to just have Seattle up the coast and back. That's an easy one to make. Then you're home for the Kings, you're home for Vancouver, and then you end November on the road between Montreal and Toronto, a Tuesday and Wednesday night north of the border. And that brings us right into December, the 1st and 2nd off. So the Sharks will obviously have stayed in Canada because they'll play their next game on the 3rd of December against the Sens. Little Saturday, Sunday back-to-back. And again, one of these back-to-backs with travel. There are a handful of these here. The Sens on a Saturday, Buffalo on a Sunday. I'd like to get at least one win out of those two games right there. Then you're back home real quick for Vancouver, but you get to stay in California on the 9th of December for the Ducks. And then you're home in California for a bit, hosting the Desert Dogs at the Kings. Quick hop, no problem. Home for Calgary and Calgary again. So that right there, that's crazy. Calgary's just going to stay in town, right? They'll fly in on the 17th. They'll be in town when the Sharks are in LA. Then the Sharks will fly in at home. They'll be home later that night, early Sunday morning. They'll play on Sunday night against the Flames. Both teams will probably rest, have an optional skate on the 19th, and then have a game day again on the 20th. I do like these. I guess I'm saying they're weird here, but I do like them. Like I wonder on the 20th of December, how that game will be impacted by what happens on the 18th. Good or bad or indifferent. There's always storylines that carry over in the NHL when there are back-to-back games against the same two teams. Okay, 22nd is the last game before the Christmas break. Sharks will host the Wild. Good that the team can have their last game before this break and a couple extra days off at home, less travel, and then they don't ramp things up again until the 27th, so likely on the evening of the 26th, Boxing Day across Canada, they'll fly up to Vancouver and be ready for that game night on the 27th. Alternating a lot of days here, they play again on the 29th at home. And then here we go with the New Year's Eve and New Year's Day combo that I have not seen in quite some time. So they're at Dallas on New Year's Eve, 5 p.m. Pacific time. So that's a 7 o'clock Texas puck drop. I'm wondering how many people like that to start their New Year's or to end their year, because you're probably at the hockey game until 10:30. You got time to celebrate New Year's, I guess. I've just always been a fan of the 4 p.m. local New Year's Eve start time. You're done by 7, go home, have dinner, then go out, do whatever you're going to do. But the Sharks have a 5 p.m. Pacific puck drop, so 4:30 pregame live on the 31st of December. And then the next day, New Year's Day, they start 2023 in Chicago. So it's likely that when the calendar ticks over, the Sharks will be en route from Texas to Illinois for that game against Chicago on the 1st of January. And then they get the 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and 5th off. Now, this road trip technically continues, but you can obviously see what's going to happen here. On New Year's Eve day, late that day, well, maybe they'll fly back on the 2nd. I'm not the one doing itinerary here, but you can see what's going to happen is they'll fly home to San Jose at some point. They'll be home for the 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th. Actually, they'll fly out on the 5th and go to Anaheim for that game on the 6th. Just kind of weird, right? That Anaheim is tagged in on that road trip, even though the Sharks will have come home for a bit and then fly down to SoCal. Quick trip down there, back up here, hosting Boston, a little back-to-back, but that's not easy, right? There's travel in between. There's one home game, but there's travel in between. And then 2 road games between I said Glendale. Between, where are they playing this year? Tempe. Between Tempe, the 5,000-seat arena in Tempe, and the Kings down to, I almost said Staples Center, Crypto.com. I'm a couple years behind here. Those 2 games back-to-back, both on the road. Yeah, it's quick travel, but again, 2 road games in a back-to-back. Then you're home for the Oil on the 13th of January. Wow, look at that. Saturday, Sunday off. You don't see that much off or very often in the Sharks schedule. Then on the 16th, a Monday night, hosting the Devils for a 1 p.m. Pacific start on the holiday. You get another home game on the 18th. That's a night game against Dallas, a couple days off. Then you're on the road for what is the longest road trip of the season. Now, the Sharks traditionally always took a long road trip in January for the tennis trip. They used to host, was it the SAP Open? Is that what it was called? At HP Pavilion back then? It was, yeah. And so and sometimes there was like a circus trip in Chicago. Their team had to leave the arena for 2 weeks while other events took place. Sharks don't really have that anymore, but they are still gone here late in the month of January for an extended period of time. You get on this road trip, Columbus, Boston, Detroit, spend a couple days in Carolina before facing the Canes and then the Penguins. Then the 29th, 30th, and 31st off, which continues to the 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th. So they're coming home, obviously, after that game in Pittsburgh. But then after this break, which these are built in, every team gets one of these extended breaks. And you know what? All-Star game's probably part of that break. Now, isn't it? I don't have that here on the schedule. That's my mistake. But I would imagine it's somewhere right in there. 7th of February and the 9th of February, that road trip technically continues, but this is obviously segmented. And it even goes 1 game farther than that. So they'll be in Florida for the 9th. Are they going to be in D.C. on the 10th, 11th, and 12th? Or maybe Florida on the 10th, D.C. on the 11th and 12th? Something like that. Probably get an extra day in Florida in February, if you can. Then back home, 1 game against the Penguins. You're back out on the road for the Golden Knights. Is that the first game in Vegas all year? They don't play them until February in Sin City. Interesting. Then back home for Buffalo, Seattle, Nashville, Chicago, and Montreal to close out the month of February. So a lot of home-heavy dates at the end of February. And that continues at the beginning of March, hosting St. Louis, hosting the Caps at home. Then you're on the road for Winnipeg, so you're north of the border, straight shot south, down to Denver, out east for St. Louis. That's a 3-game and 4-night span. And that's what I was talking about before. It's not just the back-to-back of the 6th and 7th. And it's actually here, let me see, 1, 2, 3, 4, in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 4 games in 6 nights. I guess it's 5 and 8 when you think about either the 2nd. That's a heavy span of games right there. From the 2nd of March until the 11th of March, you basically have 6 games in 9 days. That's actually what you have. So eventually you get home to hosting Minnesota. You get a couple days off. You're hosting the Blue Jackets. Very different looking Blue Jackets than Seattle. And then the Islanders. So pretty home-heavy month of March. Then you do the old traditional western swing of Canada, Edmonton, Van, and Calgary, although geographically that doesn't make a lot of sense. Usually Edmonton, Calgary, then Vancouver, or vice versa. Then back home for Winnipeg and Las Vegas to close out the month of March. And then that actually brings us to the last month here, April, which is a busy stretch. Again, 7 games in 13 days. And I would love to tell you that I hope that the Sharks have all these games matter and this is a playoff push and every last game here matters. So if it comes down to the end, just know that it's going to come down to a lot to be decided, a lot of division games here, but also a very heavy schedule at the very end for San Jose. And I would imagine most teams have it like this too, where in April they play a lot of games. But the bottom line is that's going to be taxing into a playoff series that would likely start on the 17th, Monday, April 17th, for a lot of different teams. So there you have it, a look at the Sharks 2022-23 season schedule. And I hope I made it clear. You know, I did this looking at the logistics, playing things out. I don't know what the Sharks are going to be. Certainly have hopes, but expectations and predictions at this point, just really hard to really nail them down. But I am looking forward to this. Looking forward to a season of pre- and post-game live on television and Sharks Night Shift here on the YouTube channel after the post-game shows. I'll see you there. Make sure you subscribe to this channel. Thumbs up on this video if you actually liked it.